My name is Juanita and I'm 58 years old. Today was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, watching my daughter Amanda get married. Instead, I stood frozen as she called me a pathetic failure in front of 180 guests. What none of them knew was that beneath my simple dress and quiet demeanor, I was worth $35 million. I kept my wealth secret to raise her with normal values after her father died. But when those cruel words left her lips, something inside me broke. I made a decision that would change everything between us forever. Let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe to hear how I handled what happened next when my own daughter publicly humiliated me at her wedding that I secretly paid for. I grew up in a small, working-class neighborhood in rural Pennsylvania. My parents worked multiple jobs to keep food on the table, and I learned early on that nothing in life comes easy. Despite our financial struggles, my childhood was rich with love and important lessons about the value of hard work and integrity. I met Thomas during my sophomore year of college. We were both studying business, both from modest backgrounds, and both determined to create a better future. There was an immediate connection between us, and within 6 months, I knew he was the one. Thomas had this incredible vision for a tech company, something about data security that I barely understood at the time. What I did understand was his passion and brilliance. After graduation, we got married in a simple ceremony with just 30 guests. We used our combined savings to rent a tiny apartment and converted the second bedroom into an office where Thomas worked day and night on his startup. Those early years were tough. I took a job as an administrative assistant at a local firm, while Thomas poured everything into his company. We ate ramen noodles more nights than I care to remember, and vacations were non-existent. When I became pregnant with Amanda, we were ecstatic but terrified about the financial strain. Thomas had just secured his first serious investor, but the company was still operating in the red. I worked until the day before I went into labor, and was back at my desk 6 weeks later, dropping Amanda off at the cheapest daycare we could find. Every penny mattered. As Amanda grew, so did Thomas's company. By the time she started elementary school, we had moved to a modest but comfortable house in a good school district. We could afford family vacations to the beach and didn't have to check our bank account before going out to dinner. But Thomas never forgot our humble beginnings. We taught Amanda the value of money, had her do chores for her allowance, and made sure she understood that many people weren't as fortunate as we were becoming. Then came the worst day of my life. Thomas was just 46 when he collapsed in his office from a massive heart attack. By the time I got to the hospital, he was gone. Amanda was 18, just preparing to leave for college. Our world shattered in an instant. What happened next took me completely by surprise. A larger tech company had been courting Thomas for acquisition. After his death, they proceeded with the deal, and suddenly I found myself the majority shareholder of a company worth millions. Within 2 years, that value had multiplied exponentially. I went from being a comfortable widow to having more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. Amanda was already in college when the money really started flowing in. After long talks with financial advisors and a lot of soul-searching, I made a decision that would ultimately lead to the scene at her wedding. I decided not to tell Amanda about the full extent of our wealth. It wasn't that I didn't trust my daughter. I just remembered how Thomas and I had grown as people during those lean years, how we learned to value what truly matters. I wanted Amanda to develop her own work ethic, to find her purpose without the weight of excessive wealth potentially distorting her perspective. I set up a trust fund for her that would mature when she turned 30 but kept it quiet. I paid for her college and gave her a reasonable allowance, but nothing extravagant. Meanwhile, I continued living in our family home. I could have bought a mansion, but this was where Amanda grew up, where Thomas and I had built our life together. Instead of flaunting my wealth, I established a foundation in Thomas's name that focused on educational opportunities for underprivileged kids. I volunteered at local shelters, and quietly funded several community programs. The money brought me security, but I found purpose in giving back. Amanda and I remained close during her college years. She would come home on breaks, and we'd spend hours talking about her classes, her friends, and her dreams. She was studying marketing and had her father's sharp mind for business. I was so proud of her independence and drive. She worked part-time jobs, complained about rude customers, celebrated small raises, just like any other college student, just like I had at her age. Everything changed during her senior year when she met Bradley. He came from old money, the kind of wealth that spans generations, and comes with a certain expectation of status. The first time Amanda brought him home for dinner, I could see she was nervous about our modest house and my simple cooking. That was the first tiny fracture in our relationship, a hairline crack that would eventually break my heart. Bradley seemed nice enough at first, polite and well-mannered as you'd expect from someone raised in high society. But I noticed how he would subtly look around our house with this expression that wasn't quite disgust, but definitely suggested he thought we were beneath his station. Amanda started apologizing for things she never would have noticed before, like our dated kitchen, or the fact that I drove a 6-year-old Toyota. The real problems began when I met Bradley's parents, Harold and Vivian Williams, at a dinner they hosted at their country club. From the moment I walked in, I felt out of place. The women wore designer outfits and jewelry that probably cost more than my car. Vivian looked me up and down when we were introduced, taking in my department store dress with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Amanda has told us so much about you," she said. "It must have been so difficult, raising her alone after your husband passed, and in such challenging circumstances." The way she said it made it clear she pitied me, and by extension, Amanda, for coming from such apparently humble origins. Throughout the evening, they asked questions about Thomas's small business, and seemed surprised when I mentioned I still worked part-time at a community college teaching business administration. "How quaint," Harold commented. "Most people in our circle retire as soon as possible." After that dinner, Amanda changed. She started mentioning Bradley's family's vacation homes, their connections, the exclusive events they attended. She began shopping at stores I knew she couldn't afford on her entry-level marketing salary and the allowance I provided. When I asked about it, she was vague, saying Bradley had helped her upgrade her style. Then came the engagement. Bradley proposed with a ring that must have cost at least $30,000. When Amanda showed me bouncing with excitement, my first thought was concern about a young man spending so extravagantly. But seeing her happiness, I kept those thoughts to myself. "Bradley's parents are throwing us an engagement party at their summer house in the Hamptons," she announced. "You'll need to get something really nice to wear, Mom. Everyone there will be very, you know." I did know. Very wealthy. Very judgmental. Very different from me. The engagement party was just the beginning. Amanda and Bradley set a date for the following spring, giving them a year to plan what quickly became clear would be an extraordinarily lavish wedding. During our first planning lunch, Amanda showed me venues that started at $75,000 just for the space. "Honey," I said gently, "this is beautiful, but it's quite expensive. Maybe we should look at some alternatives that won't start your married life with debt." She looked at me with something like pity. "Mom, Bradley's parents are covering most of it. They said they'd give us $200,000 for the wedding." I was stunned. That was more than Thomas and I had spent on our first house. But what really hurt was that Amanda hadn't even discussed this with me first. She'd simply assumed I couldn't contribute significantly. "I can help too," I said. "I've been saving for your wedding since you were born." It wasn't a lie. I had set aside money specifically for Amanda's future wedding, but given my financial situation, I could have covered the entire event 10 times over if needed. Amanda patted my hand condescendingly. "That's sweet, Mom. Maybe you can cover the flowers or something small." That night, I called my financial advisor. Without telling Amanda, I arranged to anonymously cover the entire cost of the wedding routing, the money through a shell company that appeared to be connected to Bradley's family business. $250,000 for my only daughter's wedding day. I wanted her to have everything she dreamed of, even if she thought it was coming from her future in-laws. As the wedding planning progressed, Amanda's behavior toward me worsened. She became dismissive of my opinions and increasingly embarrassed by what she perceived as my financial limitations. One day, while visiting a potential caterer, I overheard her talking to Bradley on the phone. "No, it's fine. Mom doesn't understand these things," she said. "After Dad died, she never really figured out how to be successful on her own. I'm basically the one who raised myself." The words cut deep. I had worked so hard to give Amanda a normal, loving childhood after Thomas died. I had been there for every school event, every heartbreak, every triumph. To hear her dismiss all of that was devastating. Worse still was when I discovered she had been telling Bradley's family that she was basically orphaned when her father died. As if I had somehow ceased to exist as a parent when Thomas passed away. The first major confrontation came 3 months before the wedding, when Amanda and I met to discuss what I would wear. I had shown her a lovely blue dress I'd found elegant and age-appropriate. "Mom, no." Her expression was horrified. "That looks like something from a discount store. The photographer will be shooting in film and everyone else will be in designer clothes. You can't embarrass me like this." "Embarrass you," I repeated, stunned by her bluntness. "You know what I mean. Bradley's mom is wearing Valentino. His aunts are all coming in from Europe with clothes you've never even heard of. I need you to look appropriate." "And what would be appropriate in your eyes, Amanda?" She pulled out her phone and showed me a plain, almost matronly dress in beige. "Something like this, simple, understated, nothing that stands out or looks cheap." I stared at my beautiful daughter, barely recognizing the person she had become. The dress she was suggesting would make me invisible, a background figure at my own daughter's wedding. But seeing the determination in her eyes, I swallowed my hurt and nodded. "If that's what would make you happy on your special day." She smiled, relieved. "It will. Trust me, it's better this way. Some of Bradley's relatives are very judgmental." As I drove home that night, tears streamed down my face. I had raised Amanda to be kind, to value character over status. Somewhere along the way, I had failed. Or perhaps keeping my wealth a secret had backfired spectacularly. Either way, the damage was done, and I had no idea how to fix it. As the wedding date approached, I found myself increasingly shut out of the planning process. Amanda had given Bradley's mother, Vivian, decision-making power over virtually everything. When I called to ask about the rehearsal dinner, Amanda sounded annoyed. "Mom Vivian's handling all that. She has connections with the best venues and vendors. You don't need to worry about it." "But I'd like to contribute," I insisted. "I'm your mother. This is an important day for me, too." "Look, I know you want to help, but honestly, it's just easier if you show up when and where we tell you. Vivian knows what she's doing, and she has the resources to make sure everything is perfect." The resources. As if money was the only valuable contribution a mother could make to her daughter's wedding. Little did she know that every extravagant detail she and Vivian were selecting was ultimately being paid for by me through the arrangement I'd made. One afternoon, while sorting through some old boxes in Thomas's office, I found something that took my breath away. It was a flash drive labeled, "For Amanda's Wedding Day," in my husband's handwriting. With shaking hands, I plugged it into my laptop. Thomas's face appeared on the screen, looking just as he had the year before he died. He was sitting in this very office, smiling that warm smile that I still missed every day. "Hi, sweetheart," he began, and I felt tears spring to my eyes. "If you're watching this, then today is your wedding day. I don't know who you've chosen to spend your life with, but I hope he makes you as happy as your mother has made me." He went on to talk about love and commitment, about the challenges and joys of marriage. He spoke about how proud he was of Amanda, how he had watched her grow into a thoughtful, compassionate young woman. "I've set aside something for you and your husband to start your life together," he continued. "Your mom knows all about it. A trust fund that should help you build the future you deserve. But remember, money is just a tool. It's how you use it that matters. The most valuable things your mother and I have given you can't be measured in dollars." The video ended with Thomas wiping away a tear, sending his love to his future son-in-law, and expressing his one regret that he wouldn't be there to walk Amanda down the aisle. I sat in stunned silence after the video ended. Thomas had recorded this message knowing he might not live to see his daughter's wedding day. And now, I had to decide whether to share it with Amanda, given how she had been treating me. I called my closest friend Grace, who had been my rock since Thomas died. Over coffee at her kitchen table, I poured out everything about Amanda's behavior, the secret wedding funding, and now Thomas's video. "You have to tell her the truth, Juanita," Grace said firmly. "About the money, about how you've been funding this entire wedding. She's living in a fantasy world where your contribution doesn't matter because she thinks you can't afford to help." "But what if the truth makes it worse?" I asked. "What if knowing about the money just reinforces this new value system she seems to have adopted, that wealth equals worth?" Grace reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "The truth is always better than a lie, even a well-intentioned one. And that video from Thomas might be exactly what Amanda needs to hear right now to remind her of the values you both tried to instill in her." I considered Grace's advice carefully. Perhaps she was right, but something held me back. I decided I would wait until after the wedding to have a heart-to-heart with Amanda. I didn't want to risk casting a shadow over her special day, no matter how much her behavior had hurt me. The rehearsal dinner confirmed I had made a mistake in waiting. Vivian had arranged everything at an exclusive restaurant overlooking the harbor. When I arrived, I discovered Amanda had seated me at a far table with distant relatives of Bradley's, whom I had never met, while she sat at the main table with Bradley's parents and siblings. Throughout the evening, I smiled politely and made conversation with these strangers, while watching my daughter laugh and celebrate with her new family. At one point, I overheard her telling one of Bradley's uncles, "My mom couldn't afford to contribute much to the wedding, but she's happy just to be included." I excused myself and went to the restroom, locking myself in a stall until I could regain my composure. The hurt was so deep, it felt physical, like something breaking inside my chest. This was my child, the little girl I had rocked to sleep countless nights, the teenager whose tears I had wiped away after her first heartbreak, the young woman I had supported through college and beyond. And now I was an afterthought, an embarrassment to be managed and minimized. As I splashed cold water on my face, I looked at my reflection and wondered if I should just tell her everything tomorrow before the wedding. But the thought of potentially ruining her wedding day held me back. I dried my eyes, reapplied my makeup, and returned to my assigned seat with a smile that hid my breaking heart. That night, alone in my hotel room, I took out Thomas's flash drive and watched his message again. I made a decision. I would bring this with me tomorrow, just in case. I prayed I wouldn't need it, that something would shift in Amanda overnight, that my loving daughter would re-emerge from this status-obsessed stranger who had taken her place. But deep down, I knew I needed to be prepared for the worst. The wedding venue was a historic mansion with sprawling gardens overlooking the ocean. As I arrived early that morning, an army of florists, decorators, and caterers were transforming the already beautiful space into something from a fairy tale. White roses and orchids adorned every surface. Crystal chandeliers had been hung from trees to create an enchanted forest effect for the outdoor ceremony. A custom dance floor had been built over the swimming pool, creating the illusion that guests would be dancing on water under the stars. All of this extravagance secretly funded by me for a daughter who thought I couldn't afford to contribute. I had expected to spend the morning helping Amanda get ready, as mothers traditionally do. Instead, I received a text informing me that she was with her bridesmaids in the bridal suite and would see me before the ceremony. So I got ready alone in my hotel room, putting on the plain beige dress. Amanda had insisted upon applying subtle makeup and styling my hair in a simple updo that wouldn't draw attention. When I finally saw Amanda in her bridal suite, I gasped. She looked absolutely breathtaking in a custom gown that must have cost as much as a luxury car. Her dark hair was arranged in elegant waves beneath a diamond-encrusted tiara, and around her neck was a stunning sapphire pendant, a gift from Bradley's parents. "Oh, Amanda," I whispered, "you look beautiful." She turned from the mirror and gave me a quick, distracted smile. "Thanks, Mom." Her eyes flicked over my appearance, and I saw approval that I had followed her instructions about looking understated. "You look nice, too." The wedding planner popped her head in. 15 minutes until we begin, ladies." Amanda's bridesmaids, all friends from college or connections through Bradley, rushed to make final adjustments to her train and veil. I stood awkwardly to the side, feeling like an intruder rather than the mother of the bride. "Mom," Amanda said suddenly, "you'll walk me down the aisle, right, since Dad can't be here?" The unexpected sentimentality caught me off guard. For a moment, I saw my real daughter again, the one who missed her father and wanted her mother by her side on this important day. "Of course, sweetheart, it would be my honor." The ceremony itself was magical. As I walked Amanda down the aisle past 180 impeccably dressed guests to where Bradley waited beneath an arch of white roses, I felt a surge of maternal pride and love that pushed aside all the hurt of recent months. In that perfect moment, nothing mattered except my daughter's happiness. After the exchange of vows and rings after Amanda and Bradley were pronounced husband and wife, the fantasy began to crack again. At the reception, I discovered I had been seated not at the head table with the couple and Bradley's parents, but at a table near the back with some of Amanda's former colleagues, none of whom I knew well. I watched as Bradley's father made a grand show of welcoming guests to this spectacular celebration that my wife and I are proud to host for our son and new daughter. No mention of me at all, though I was the one who had anonymously funded every crystal glass and gourmet bite. The speeches began after the main course. Bradley's father went first, raising his champagne flute to toast the couple. His speech was full of inside jokes about Bradley's childhood and veiled references to the family's wealth and status. He concluded by announcing that he and Vivian were gifting the newlyweds a down payment on a house in their exclusive neighborhood to keep the family close. Bradley's best man spoke next, followed by Amanda's maid of honor. Then Bradley took the microphone to thank everyone for coming and to tell Amanda how much he loved her. It was sweet and seemed heartfelt. I found myself warming to my new son-in-law, despite everything. Then unexpectedly, Amanda stood and took the microphone from her husband. This wasn't on the program, and I felt a flutter of anxiety as she smiled out at the crowd. "I want to say a few words too," she began. "First, I have to thank Harold and Vivian for this amazing wedding. Everything is absolutely perfect, and I couldn't have asked for more generous, loving in-laws." She turned to beam at Bradley's parents, who nodded graciously from their prominent position at the head table. "I also want to thank all of you for being here to celebrate with us, especially those of you who have been there since the beginning, who knew me before I met Bradley and became part of his wonderful family." Her gaze swept the room and landed on me for a brief moment before moving on. My heart lifted slightly at the acknowledgement. "As most of you know, I lost my dad when I was 18. It was the hardest thing I've ever been through." A sympathetic murmur went through the crowd. I noticed a few people glancing my way. What many of you don't know is how challenging life was after that. Amanda's voice took on a strange tone I'd never heard before. My mom did her best, but after Dad died, she never really recovered. Not emotionally, and certainly not financially. The room went completely silent. I felt as though I had been doused in ice water. I put myself through college, worked multiple jobs, and basically raised myself because my mom was just— Amanda paused, searching for words. A pathetic failure who couldn't move forward after losing Dad. Gasps rippled through the audience. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Look at her," Amanda continued, gesturing toward me. All 180 guests turned to stare. She couldn't even afford a proper dress for my wedding. Always broke, always struggling. It's why Bradley's parents had to step in and give me the wedding I deserved. The silence in the room was deafening. I felt hot tears threatening to spill down my cheeks, but I refused to break down in front of all these strangers. But I overcame that disadvantaged background. Amanda continued, her voice taking on an inspirational tone that made me feel sick. And now, I'm starting a new chapter with my amazing husband and his incredible family, who have shown me what success really looks like. She raised her glass. To new beginnings and leaving the past behind. A scattered, uncomfortable applause followed. I sat frozen, unable to process the public humiliation my own daughter had just inflicted on me. The pitying looks from nearby guests made it even worse. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could feel was a crushing pain in my chest, and the sensation that everything around me was moving in slow motion. In that moment, something shifted inside me. A lifetime of putting others first, of quiet sacrifice, of turning the other cheek, suddenly seemed like a horrible mistake. I had let Amanda believe a lie for too long, and that lie had twisted her into someone I barely recognized. It was time for the truth. The room was still uncomfortably quiet as Amanda returned to her seat, seemingly oblivious to the inappropriate nature of what she had just done. Bradley was whispering something in her ear, his expression concerned. His parents looked simultaneously embarrassed by the scene and smugly superior about being positioned as the heroic, wealthy saviors in Amanda's narrative. With steady hands that betrayed none of my inner turmoil, I reached into my purse and retrieved my phone with Thomas's video. I stood up, straightened my beige dress, and walked calmly toward the stage. The DJ, perhaps sensing an intervention was needed, handed me the microphone without my having to ask. I stood before the guests, aware of every eye in the room on me. Amanda's face showed confusion, then alarm as she realized I was about to speak. "Good evening, everyone." I began, my voice remarkably level, despite the emotions churning inside me. "For those who don't know me, I'm Juanita, Amanda's mother." A few sympathetic smiles greeted me from the audience. They thought I was about to smooth things over, perhaps make a self-deprecating joke to salvage my dignity after my daughter's public takedown. First, I want to thank you all for coming to celebrate Amanda and Bradley's special day. It truly is a beautiful wedding, isn't it? Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. I'd like to clarify something about this wedding. While Bradley's parents have been very involved in the planning, and I appreciate their input and support, I am actually the one who paid for everything you see here today. Every flower, every plate of food, every drop of champagne. All $250,000 worth. A collective gasp went up from the guests. At the head table, Bradley's parents exchanged alarmed glances. Amanda's mouth fell open in shock. "You see, what my daughter doesn't know is that after her father died, his technology company was acquired by a larger firm for a substantial sum. I am, in fact, worth approximately $35 million. The silence in the room was now charged with a different kind of tension. I could see Amanda's face had gone pale. I made a choice not to tell Amanda about our financial situation. Thomas and I both came from humble beginnings. We struggled in the early years of our marriage, and those challenges shaped us in important ways. We wanted our daughter to develop her own work ethic, her own sense of purpose, without the cushion of extreme wealth, potentially distorting her perspective. I paused, looking directly at my daughter. I realize now that was a mistake. Not because money is what matters most, but because the lack of honesty between us created a space for misunderstanding and resentment to grow. And for that, I am truly sorry, Amanda. I turned back to the wider audience. What I'm not sorry for is the values Thomas and I tried to instill in our daughter. Kindness, humility, the understanding that a person's worth has nothing to do with their bank account. My voice cracked slightly, but I pressed on. Before I sit down, I have something special to share. Something I discovered recently while going through some of Thomas's old things. I gestured to the DJ, who had been watching this drama unfold with wide eyes. Could I connect my phone to the projector system, please? After a moment of technical adjustment, the large screen that had been showing candid photos of the couple throughout the reception now displayed a frozen image of Thomas in his office. This is a message from Amanda's father, recorded before he died, specifically for her wedding day. I pressed play, and Thomas's voice filled the ballroom. Hi, sweetheart. If you're watching this, then today is your wedding day. Amanda's hands flew to her mouth. She had not heard her father's voice in 12 years. As Thomas's heartfelt message played, sharing his love, his wisdom about marriage, and his mention of the trust fund he had set up for Amanda, tears flowed freely throughout the room. Bradley had his arm around Amanda, whose shoulders were shaking with sobs. When the video ended with Thomas's emotional wish that he could be there to walk her down the aisle, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. I looked at my daughter, seeing real emotion break through the facade she had been wearing for months. I did walk you down the aisle today, Amanda. I've been here all along, doing my best to honor your father's memory and to be the parent you needed. I'm sorry if I've failed in some ways, but I have never been a failure, and I have never been broke. I simply chose to value things money can't buy. I handed the microphone back to the DJ. Please, everyone, continue enjoying the celebration. This is still a joyous occasion, the wedding of my beloved daughter to the man she loves. As I turned to leave the stage, the room erupted in spontaneous applause. It wasn't for me, I knew, but for Thomas, for his beautiful message from beyond the grave. Still, the sound buoyed me as I made my way back toward my table, holding my head high, despite the tears on my cheeks. Before I could reach my seat, Amanda was rushing toward me, her elaborate gown billowing around her makeup streaked with tears. The room watched in tense silence as mother and daughter stood face to face in the middle of the reception. For a long moment, Amanda and I just stared at each other, the gulf between us, seemingly as wide as the ocean, visible through the venue's panoramic windows. Her face was a storm of emotions, tears smearing the careful makeup, her eyes reflecting shock, anger, shame, and confusion, all at once. How could you? She finally whispered, her voice breaking. How could you keep this from me? All this time letting me believe we were struggling, that I had to be embarrassed about where I came from. Amanda, I said quietly, aware that despite our semi-private position, many guests were straining to overhear. This isn't the place. Let's talk somewhere private. Bradley appeared at Amanda's side, his expression unreadable. There's an empty room down the hall, he said. Why don't you both take a moment? Amanda allowed herself to be led away, and I followed, feeling the weight of 180 sets of eyes on my back. As we walked, I noticed Bradley's parents in hushed, intense conversation, their faces ashen. The power dynamic had shifted dramatically in the span of 10 minutes, and they were clearly struggling to process this new reality. The room Bradley directed us to was a small library, wood-paneled and intimate, a stark contrast to the opulent ballroom we'd just left. As soon as the door closed behind us, Amanda whirled to face me. $35 million, she hissed. Dad's company was worth that much, and you kept it from me. Yes, I admitted, sinking into a leather armchair. The acquisition went through about a year after your father died. By the time you finished college, the value had multiplied several times over. But why? Why would you hide this from me? Do you have any idea how it felt to meet Bradley's family, to be treated like some charity case they were graciously accepting, to feel like I wasn't good enough because of where I came from? There was genuine pain in her voice, and it cut through my own hurt. I hadn't considered how my decision might have affected her entry into Bradley's wealthy social circle. I thought I was protecting you, I said softly. Your father and I both came from nothing, Amanda. We knew what it was like to build something from scratch, to appreciate every small victory. Those struggles shaped us, made us stronger, more compassionate. I wanted that for you too. So you lied to me for years. Her voice was flat now, the initial outburst cooling into something harder. You let me believe I was on my own after Dad died, that we were barely getting by. That's not true, I protested. I never said we were barely getting by. I paid for your college, gave you an allowance, made sure you had everything you needed. I just didn't give you unlimited access to wealth you hadn't earned. What about Dad's video? When were you planning to show me that? I sighed deeply. I only found it last week. I was going to share it with you after the wedding. I didn't want to overwhelm you with emotions right before your big day. Amanda laughed bitterly. Well, that worked out great, didn't it? Instead, I humiliated both of us in front of everyone we know. For the first time, a flash of remorse crossed her face. She sank into the chair opposite mine, the enormous white gown pooling around her like a cloud. Why did you say those things about me? I asked the question that had been burning inside me since she took the microphone. That I was a pathetic failure. That you raised yourself. None of that was true, Amanda. Not one word. She looked down at her hands, twisting her new wedding ring. I don't know, she whispered. It just came out. Ever since I met Bradley, I've felt this pressure to fit in with his family, to prove I belong in their world. They're all so successful, so confident in their place in society. She looked up at me, and I saw a glimpse of my real daughter, vulnerable and uncertain. When I brought you to meet them that first time, I saw how they looked at you, at us, like we were quaint, like we were a project Bradley had taken on. I started embellishing things, making it sound like I came from less, so my accomplishments would seem more impressive. And then I couldn't stop. The story just grew and grew until you were publicly denouncing your mother at your own wedding. I finished for her. She winced. I'm so sorry, Mom. I don't know what's happened to me. I don't recognize myself anymore. The door opened and Bradley entered cautiously. Is everything okay? People are asking questions out there. Amanda looked at him with red-rimmed eyes. Did you know about my mom's money? Bradley shook his head. No, I had no idea. But Amanda, why would it matter? I fell in love with you, not your bank account, or lack thereof. Really? She challenged. You never once questioned why someone from my supposedly humble background fits so easily into your social circle. You never wondered how I could afford designer clothes on an entry-level salary. A flush crept up Bradley's neck. I assumed you were in debt, honestly. A lot of people in my world live beyond their means to keep up appearances. I was planning to help you sort it out after the wedding. Amanda's face crumpled. So you did think I was just a poor girl you were rescuing? No, Bradley protested. That's not what I meant. I didn't think much about it at all. I loved you. I still love you. I watched this exchange with a growing awareness that Amanda's relationship with Bradley might be built on shakier ground than I'd realized. Had she fallen in love with him, or with the status his family represented? Had he fallen in love with her, or with the narrative of elevating someone he perceived as less fortunate? We should get back to the reception, I said, standing up. Your guests are waiting, and this conversation can continue later." Amanda stood as well, smoothing her dress with trembling hands. "What do we tell everyone?" "The truth," I said firmly. "That there was a misunderstanding, that emotions got the better of us, and that we're moving forward as a family. If you want to." She nodded slowly. "I do want that. I'm so sorry, Mom. I don't know how to make this right." "You can start by being honest. With me, with Bradley, and most importantly with yourself. About who you are and what really matters to you." Bradley held out his hand to Amanda. "Are you ready to go back out there?" She took a deep breath and placed her hand in his. "Yes. But first I need to do something." When we returned to the ballroom, conversations hushed as guests noticed our re-entry. Amanda walked directly to the stage and took the microphone once more. I held my breath, unsure what she was about to say. "Everyone, I owe you all an apology, but most of all, I owe one to my mother." She began, her voice steady, despite the tears still visible on her cheeks. "What I said earlier was not just untrue, it was cruel and unfair. My mother has been my rock since my father died. She has supported me in every way possible, and I let insecurity and a desire to impress others lead me to betray that love in the worst way." She looked directly at me as she continued. "Mom, I am so deeply sorry. You have never been a failure. You've been the best mother anyone could ask for, and I've been blind to that blessing. Can you forgive me?" The question hung in the air between us. In that moment, looking at my daughter's tear-streaked face, all the hurt of recent months seemed to dissolve. This was my child, flawed and struggling, just as I had been at her age. "Of course I forgive you," I said loud enough for those nearby to hear. Relief washed over Amanda's face. She turned back to the guests. "Please, everyone, continue celebrating with us. There's been enough drama for one wedding day." As the music resumed and guests tentatively returned to their conversations, Amanda stepped down from the stage and made her way to me. Without a word, she wrapped her arms around me in a fierce hug. "I love you, Mom," she whispered against my ear. "I love you too, sweetheart. Always have, always will." The remainder of the reception continued with a noticeably different atmosphere. Bradley's parents made a point of coming to speak with me, suddenly interested in hearing about Thomas's company and my philanthropic work. I was polite but kept the conversations brief, having no interest in forming relationships built on my financial worth. What mattered more was the moment when the DJ announced the mother-daughter dance, an item that had been quietly removed from the program at Amanda's request. Now she led me to the center of the dance floor, and as we swayed to one of Thomas's favorite songs, I felt the first tentative steps toward healing between us. "We have a lot to talk about," Amanda said softly. "We do," I agreed, "but not today. Today is for celebrating your marriage and new beginning." As I looked over Amanda's shoulder at the sea of watching faces, I caught Grace's eye from her table across the room. She gave me a subtle thumbs up and mouthed, "Well done." Perhaps it was strange, but in that moment, dancing with my daughter after one of the most painful and honest exchanges of our lives, I felt Thomas's presence more strongly than I had in years. Not from the video, but in the resilience of our family bond, tested, but not broken by mistakes on both sides. 1 month after the wedding, Amanda and I met for lunch at a quiet cafe near my house. She looked different, more like her old self in jeans and a simple sweater, instead of the designer clothes she'd adopted during her engagement. Bradley was with her, and I was glad to see him. Despite my concerns about the foundation of their relationship, I genuinely hoped they could build something real and lasting together. "How was Bali?" I asked as we settled at our table. They had chosen a relatively modest honeymoon destination rather than the extravagant European tour originally planned. "It was beautiful," Amanda replied. "Peaceful. Exactly what we needed after everything." There was a moment of awkward silence as the unspoken hung between us, the memory of the wedding day drama that had become the talk of both our social circles. "Mom," Amanda finally said, reaching across the table to take my hand, "I've been doing a lot of thinking since the wedding, about who I became when I met Bradley, about the values I lost sight of." "We both have," Bradley added. "Amanda told me everything about how she grew up, the real story this time, about how you and her dad built something from nothing, about the lessons you tried to teach her." "I told him about the trust fund too," Amanda said. "The one Dad mentioned in the video. I assume that's real?" I nodded. "Yes, it matures when you turn 30, though. Given recent events, we could discuss accessing it sooner, if you'd like." She shook her head firmly. "No. Actually, I'd like to know more about the foundation work you've been doing, the programs you've been funding anonymously all these years." This surprised me. "Really, you're interested in philanthropy?" "I am now." She smiled ruefully. "When all your materialistic fantasies come true overnight, and you still feel empty, it makes you reconsider what actually matters." Over the next 2 hours, we had the most honest conversation we'd had in years. I told Amanda everything about my financial decisions after Thomas died, my charitable work, the community programs I'd been supporting. She shared how her insecurities had spiraled after meeting Bradley's family, how she'd created an entirely false narrative about her upbringing to impress them. "I convinced myself I was doing it for good reasons," she admitted. "That I was protecting you from their judgment, that I was ensuring Bradley's family accepted me. But really, I was just ashamed. Not of you, Mom, but of feeling like I wasn't good enough on my own merits." "And I never meant to make you feel that way," Bradley said, looking genuinely remorseful. "I fell in love with you for who you are, not for where you came from, but I can see now how the pressure of my family's expectations affected you." "We've made a decision," Amanda continued, squeezing Bradley's hand. "We're not going to accept the down payment on the house from his parents. We're going to find our own place, something modest that we can afford on our salaries." I must have looked skeptical because Bradley laughed. "It's true. I've actually taken a new job at a nonprofit. Less money, but more meaningful work. My parents are adjusting to the idea." "And I'd like to get involved with your foundation," Amanda added. "If you'll have me, I have a marketing background that could be useful for fundraising." The hope I felt hearing these words was cautious but real. People can change, I reminded myself. Sometimes they need a wake-up call to remember who they truly are. "I'd like that very much," I told them. "The foundation could definitely use your skills." Over the following weeks, this tentative reconciliation blossomed into something new and genuine between us. Amanda and I established a Sunday tradition of volunteering together at a women's shelter I'd been supporting for years. Watching her connect with the residents there, offering resume writing workshops and job interview preparation, I saw echoes of Thomas's compassion in her. Bradley surprised me too. He threw himself into his new role at an organization providing technology education to underprivileged youth with genuine enthusiasm. When his parents expressed their disappointment at his downgrade in career, he stood firm in his choice. 3 months after the wedding, Amanda and Bradley bought a small but charming house in a middle-class neighborhood, using a reasonable portion of her trust fund as a down payment after much discussion between the three of us. It was nothing like the mansion his parents had offered to help them purchase, but when they hosted us for dinner in their new home, the pride on both their faces was unmistakable. "We're furnishing it slowly," Amanda told me as she gave me a tour. "Buying pieces we really love, instead of just filling it with expensive things to impress visitors." I recognized the lesson in her words, the same one Thomas and I had tried to teach her growing up. It had taken a detour and a painful confrontation, but the values had found their way back to her heart. As for my relationship with Amanda, the painful honesty of the wedding day had cleared the air between us in ways I never could have anticipated. We were more open with each other now, more willing to express our true feelings rather than hiding behind politeness or assumptions. "I understand now why you kept the money secret," she told me one day as we sorted donations at the shelter. "I'm not sure I agree with the decision, but I understand the intention behind it." "And I understand why it backfired," I acknowledged. "Honesty should have come before any lesson I was trying to teach." 6 months after the wedding, Amanda came to my house on a Sunday afternoon, practically bouncing with excitement. Bradley followed, looking equally thrilled, but trying to contain it. "Mom," Amanda said as soon as I opened the door, "we have news." My heart leaped. "Are you—" She nodded to tears springing to her eyes. "I'm pregnant. You're going to be a grandmother." The joy that filled me in that moment was unlike anything I'd felt since Thomas died. As I hugged my daughter, feeling her tears wet my shoulder, I thought about how close we had come to losing each other, how a lifetime of love had nearly been severed by mistakes on both sides. "Your father would be so proud," I whispered, "of both of you." Later, sitting in my garden while Bradley grilled dinner, Amanda turned to me with a serious expression. "Mom, I want to do this right. I want my child to grow up with the values you and Dad tried to give me, to understand that worth isn't measured by a bank account or social status." "You will," I assured her. "You've found your way back to those values yourself. That's the most powerful lesson you can pass on the journey and the understanding you've gained from it." As the sun set over our small family gathering, I reflected on how what had seemed like the worst moment of my life had ultimately led to the most honest, authentic relationship with my daughter. The path had been painful, but the destination was worth every step. What would I tell my grandchild someday about the importance of honesty, about the true value of wealth, about the healing power of forgiveness? The lessons were still unfolding, but one thing was certain: the next generation would learn from both our mistakes and our reconciliation. The most valuable inheritance isn't measured in millions, but in the wisdom gained through both failure and redemption. In the end, that's the true fortune I hope to pass on. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between honesty and protection when it comes to family? Would you have kept the money secret like I did, or taken a different approach? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real-life experiences and the lessons they've taught me. Remember, sometimes what seems like the end of a relationship is actually the beginning of something more authentic and valuable than you ever imagined.